Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey there, Herman and Corn. Not to overdo the topic of air quality too much, although I guess if anyone listens back to these episodes, or if I ever want to get the old air quality episodes, we'll have quite the content library to choose from, because we've covered it in different formats and different aspects of the picture. And I guess it's one of those things that you kind of say, it's actually pretty important. I mean, to state the obvious, we think about what we eat. There's no shortage of information about diet advice and all the rest of it. And yet when it comes to the oxygen, the air that we respire every single minute, it's still kind of this relatively obscure topic. So my wife and I last night slept with our HEPA filter for the first time ever. And we both woke up feeling really refreshed and restored. And we weren't, of course, we're both wondering, is it our imagination? But it was a really great feeling. But to continue the air quality excitement, I look out at the sky today in Jerusalem and it's totally orange. Well, not totally orange, but it's like, it's a dust storm, I think, unless there's some other cosmic reason going on why the sky looks like that. But you see this around this time of year, usually in the spring, something is kicking up in the atmosphere. So I got a notification on IQ Air Visual, very nice app, saying we currently have AQI in Jerusalem of 105, and the main pollutant, I'm just reading directly from the app here, PM 2.5, 37 nanograms per cubic meter. The forecast is for it to drop a little bit, and nitrogen dioxide is normal. And it says here PM 2.5 concentration is currently 7.4 times the WHO annual air quality guideline value. Oh dear. So Herman and Corn, today's question about air quality is this. I get a piece of information like this and I have to go to a meeting now. I told my wife, I'm looking outside saying, oh gosh, should I be going out in this anymore? Now I wouldn't have hesitated before, but now that I have this app sending me notifications, I do wonder this. I'm going to do something brave for me because I'm a self-conscious person. I'm going to put on a KN95 mask or an N95. We have good stock up left from the Corona era. And I know people are going to look at me like I'm crazy or maybe think to themselves, this guy must be really infirm. But it's not a normal thing here in Jerusalem to have to put on masks. And I think it's a pity we mentioned there's a culture of mask wearing in the East where air quality is a much more prevalent issue, that I was kind of hoping a little bit of that would stick around after COVID. Not that I want for people, for everyone to be walking around in masks. But it'd be nice if it was more normalized for those of us who have respiratory conditions, that we don't feel like everyone's going to be staring at us thinking, does this guy know that Corona's over? Anyway, Herman and Corn, what I really wanted to ask in today's episode is the practical guidance. When I see the air quality is 105, now I don't want to live my life as a hermit. I don't want to be stuck inside next to my HEPA filter, but how do you know if that's reasonable? Like, is it reasonable for me to walk 10 minutes out of the house and back to a meeting that's important, or should I really have deferred the meeting? Is the answer where your asthma control is at in the moment? And if the AQI was 150, which I've seen it at when there was forest fires, what's the absolute no-go level? Actually, I'm looking at the map now of air quality. Oh, this is super interesting. Wow, this is a fascinating area. Okay, we're at 105 in the city centre, but in South Jerusalem, in Beit Safafa, they're currently registering 152 AQI with a PM 2.5 of 56.4 nanograms. So this really speaks to your point that we've talked about before, about the importance of not just I'm counting the number of stations we have, 4 or 5 stations in Jerusalem. And you mentioned that we really need more because that's quite a difference. 152, 105, 132, 126. There's a AQI difference of 33%, just within the one city. So it really shows you how localized air quality is, especially when you have these events. So Herman and Corn, let's focus today on this question of when do you stay indoors? If you have asthma, what are the approximate levels we need to be watching out for? And that's it, basically. Over to you two.
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn, and I am sitting here looking out the window at a sky that looks like it has been through an extreme Instagram filter from 2012. It is definitely a deep, heavy orange kind of day here in Jerusalem. It is Monday, February 9th, 2026, and the world outside looks like we have been transported to the surface of Mars.
It really does, Corn. Herman Poppleberry here, and I have to say, the light today is truly eerie. It is that classic Hamzin weather, or what some call the Sharav. It is essentially a weather system where the hot, dry air from the Sahara or the Arabian Desert just decides to pay the Levant a massive visit, bringing millions of tons of dust with it. Our housemate Daniel actually sent us a prompt about this today because he is feeling the physical effects and trying to navigate the practical side of living with asthma when the air looks and tastes like tomato soup.
It is a great question because it moves beyond the abstract. We talk about air quality a lot on this show in a general sense, but when you are actually staring at a notification on your phone that says the air is unhealthy and you have a meeting across town, what do you actually do? Daniel mentioned he woke up feeling surprisingly great because they finally ran their high-end HEPA filter all through the night, which is a massive win for his lungs, but now he is facing the outside world. He is looking at the door like it is the airlock of a spaceship.
That feeling of being refreshed after using a HEPA filter is not just in his head or a placebo effect. If the indoor air was stagnant or full of the usual particulates that settle in an old stone house in Jerusalem, things like mold spores, pet dander, or fine construction dust, and then you suddenly scrub that air clean, your respiratory system gets a massive break. Your body stops producing as much mucus, and the inflammation in your bronchioles starts to subside. But then you look outside and see the AQI, or Air Quality Index, hitting 105 or even 152 in some parts of the city, and the anxiety kicks in. For an asthmatic, that is a very rational fear.
So let us start there, Herman. For someone like Daniel, or anyone listening who has asthma or sensitive lungs, what are the actual numbers we need to be watching? Because 105 sounds bad. But is it stay inside and lock the doors bad? Or is it just a bit of a cough bad?
That is the crucial distinction we need to clear up. The Air Quality Index is a scale that typically runs from 0 to 500. Most people think of it as a linear scale of badness, but for sensitive groups, the thresholds are very specific and the risks are non-linear. When the AQI is between 0 and 50, that is the green zone, everyone is fine. From 51 to 100, that is yellow or moderate. Most people are still okay, but if you are unusually sensitive to ozone or particulates, you might start to feel a little something in the back of your throat.
But Daniel is seeing 105 on his app right now. That puts him in the orange zone, right?
Exactly. The orange zone runs from 101 to 150. The official label for this is unhealthy for sensitive groups. This is the specific bracket where people with asthma, the elderly, and children are told to reduce prolonged or heavy exertion outdoors. It does not necessarily mean you cannot step outside to grab the mail or walk to your car, but it means your lungs are going to be working significantly harder than they should. For an asthmatic, the orange zone is the warning shot. It is the point where your maintenance inhaler is doing the heavy lifting and your rescue inhaler should be in your pocket, not in a drawer at home.
Okay, so if the app says 105 and he has a 10-minute walk to a meeting, is that considered prolonged exertion, or is he overthinking it?
Probably not for a healthy person, but for someone with asthma, it depends entirely on the type of pollutant. Daniel mentioned PM 2.5. That stands for particulate matter that is 2.5 micrometers or smaller. To give you some perspective, a human hair is about 70 micrometers in diameter, so these particles are about 30 times smaller than the width of a single hair. They are small enough to get past the hairs in your nose, past the cilia in your throat, and deep into the alveoli of your lungs. From there, they can actually cross the alveolar capillary barrier and enter your bloodstream.
That is the part that always gets me. The idea that the air is not just affecting your breathing, but your entire systemic health, because those particles are so small, they basically have a backstage pass to your blood. It is not just a lung issue, it is a vascular issue.
Precisely. And in a dust storm like we are seeing today in Jerusalem, you have a mix. You have PM10, which is larger dust and pollen that usually gets caught in the upper respiratory tract, and you have PM2.5, which is often more related to combustion or very fine mineral dust. When Daniel sees that PM2.5 is 7.4 times the World Health Organization guideline, that is a serious trigger for inflammation. If I were him, and I had to do that 10-minute walk at an AQI of 105, I would be thinking about the cumulative load.
What do you mean by cumulative load? Is it like a radiation dose?
In a way, yes. Think of your lungs like a bucket. Every minute you spend in poor air, you are adding a little bit of grit and inflammation to that bucket. A 10-minute walk might not overflow the bucket on its own, but if you do that walk, then sit in a drafty office where the air is also poor, and then walk back and then cook dinner over a gas stove, by the end of the day, your bucket is full and you are reaching for your rescue inhaler or experiencing a full-blown attack. The orange zone is about managing that bucket.
So the advice for the orange zone, that 101 to 150 range, is really about mitigation. It is about saying, if you can skip the walk, skip it. If you have to go, maybe do not power walk. Take it slow. But what happens when it hits 151? Because Daniel mentioned he saw 152 on the map in South Jerusalem. That is a different color on the map.
That is, the red zone. 151 to 200 is officially unhealthy. At this point, even people without asthma might start to feel the sting in their eyes, a scratchy throat, or a slight headache. For an asthmatic, this is where the guidance shifts from reduce exertion to avoid exertion. If the AQI is over 150, you really should not be walking to meetings if you can help it. That is the point where you call a taxi or see if you can join the meeting via video call. The risk of a sudden bronchospasm increases significantly once you cross that 150 threshold.
It is interesting that the map showed such a big difference within the same city. 105 in the center and 152 in the south. That is a 50% jump just a few kilometers away. Why is it so localized? Is the sensor just broken?
Air is a fluid, corn. It flows around hills, it gets trapped in valleys, and it reacts to local sources. In Jerusalem, you have a lot of complex topography. South Jerusalem might be catching more of the direct wind coming up from the Judean desert, or it might be in a pocket where the dust is settling due to a local pressure drop. This is why these apps are so useful, but also why they can be frustrating. If there is no sensor right next to your house, the app is interpolating, or guessing based on the nearest data points.
Right, and as Daniel pointed out, we only have a handful of official government stations here. If you are in a neighborhood that is downwind of a major construction site, and there are plenty of those in Jerusalem right now, or a busy highway junction, your personal AQI might be 20 or 30 points higher than what the official app says.
That is why I always tell people to use their eyes and their nose as the primary sensors. If the sky is orange and you can smell the metallic, earthy scent of the dust, trust that more than a green icon on an app that might be pulling data from a sensor 5 miles away that happens to be in a sheltered park. If you can see a haze, you are looking at particulates.
Let us talk about the mask. Daniel mentioned he was going to be brave and put on a KN95 or an N95 mask. He felt a bit self-conscious about it because, as he said, it is not a common sight here anymore now that the pandemic years are behind us. But from a purely technical standpoint, how much of a difference does that mask make for an asthmatic in a dust storm?
It makes a massive, measurable difference, but only if it is the right kind of mask and worn correctly. A standard surgical mask, those loose blue ones, they are designed to stop large droplets coming out of your mouth. They are not designed to filter out PM2.5. The air just leaks around the sides because it follows the path of least resistance. But an N95 or a KN95, if fitted correctly to create a seal, is designed to filter out 95% of those tiny particles using a web of polypropylene fibers that often have an electrostatic charge to trap the dust.
So if he wears that mask on his 10-minute walk, he is effectively bringing the AQI of the air he is actually breathing down from 105 to something like 5 or 10. He is basically bringing the green zone with him.
Exactly. He is essentially creating a portable clean air environment. It might feel socially awkward to some, but biologically, it is a brilliant move. I actually wish we had adopted the culture you see in cities like Tokyo or Seoul, where wearing a mask on a high-pollution day is just considered a sensible health choice, like wearing a coat when it is cold or sunglasses when it is bright. It is a tool for environmental management.
It is funny how we have this psychological barrier to it now. We associate masks with a very specific, stressful time in history, so wearing one for air quality feels like a statement. But if you have asthma, your lungs do not care about the social statement. They just care about the inflammation.
And that inflammation is not just an immediate wheeze. This is something people often miss. You might go for that walk in the orange AQI, feel fine while you are doing it, and then 6 hours later, or even the next morning, you wake up with a tight chest and a cough. The inflammatory response to those particulates can be delayed as the body tries to process the foreign matter that has reached the deep lung tissue.
That is a really important point. It is like a sunburn. You do not feel the burn while you are standing in the sun. You feel it later that night when the damage has already been done. So if Daniel is thinking, I feel okay right now, I will just risk it, he might be setting himself up for a very rough night or a ruined Tuesday.
Exactly. And for an asthmatic, that delayed response can lead to a flare-up that requires steroids or more aggressive treatment. It is much easier to prevent the inflammation with a mask than to calm it down once the immune system has gone into overdrive.
So let us give some very concrete takeaways here for the different levels. We have established that 0 to 50 is the dream. 50 to 100 is the yellow zone where you keep an eye on things. 100 to 150 is the orange zone. Herman, what is the hard rule for an asthmatic in the orange zone?
In the orange zone, which is 101 to 150, the rule is, do not be a hero. If you have to go outside, do not run, do not cycle, and do not do anything that makes you breathe deeply or quickly. If you can move your activity indoors, do it. If you have an air purifier like Daniel does, make sure it is running on a higher setting than usual to account for the increased infiltration of dust through the window seals. And honestly, if you have an N95 mask in the drawer, this is the time to use it for any walk longer than 5 minutes.
And then once we cross that 150 threshold into the red zone.
That is when you should actively avoid being outside. If the AQI is over 150, your goal should be to stay in a filtered environment. This is not the day to walk to the grocery store or go to the gym. This is the day you order delivery or wait until the wind shifts. If you absolutely must go out, the mask is no longer optional in my book. It is a medical necessity for someone with reactive airways.
What about the levels above that? We sometimes see purple or even maroon on the maps during extreme events.
Once you hit 200 or 300, we are talking about hazardous conditions for everyone, not just sensitive groups. At that point, the particulates are so thick that even healthy lungs are being damaged in real time. For an asthmatic, an AQI of 300 is an emergency. You should have your windows sealed with tape if necessary, your purifiers on max, and you should probably avoid any physical activity even inside the house if your indoor air quality isn't verified.
I want to go back to something Daniel mentioned about feeling refreshed after using the HEPA filter. He was wondering if it was his imagination. Why does clean air feel so different? Is it just the lack of irritants, or is there something more to it?
It is a combination of physiological factors. When you remove those fine particulates, your body stops having to produce as much mucus and inflammatory markers to trap and expel them. Your heart rate actually tends to drop slightly because your blood is better oxygenated and your system isn't under constant low-level stress. There is also a major psychological component. When you aren't subconsciously struggling for every breath, your nervous system can move out of that mild fight-or-flight state.
That is fascinating. So the HEPA filter is basically giving his parasympathetic nervous system a break. It is letting his body know it is safe to relax.
Precisely. And in a city like Jerusalem, where we have a lot of stone dust, construction, and vehicle emissions, most of us are living with a baseline level of air pollution that we just get used to. We think it is normal. When you finally experience truly clean air, like what a HEPA filter provides in a sealed room, it feels like a revelation. It is like turning off a loud hum in the background that you hadn't realized was giving you a headache until it stopped.
So, if Daniel is looking at his app and seeing 105, and he has this meeting, what is the play? He has the HEPA filter at home. He has a 10-minute walk. He has a mask.
My advice to him would be this: wear the mask. It is a 10-minute walk. If he wears a well-fitted KN95, he will be totally fine. But when he gets to the meeting, he should check the environment there. If the meeting is in a room with open windows or no air filtration, he might want to keep the mask on or ask to close the windows. There is no point in filtering your 10-minute walk only to sit in an orange zone room for an hour. People often forget that indoor air is just outdoor air that has come inside.
That is a great point. Indoor air quality often mirrors outdoor air quality unless there is active filtration or a very modern HVAC system. If a building is old and drafty, the AQI inside might only be 10 or 20% lower than it is outside.
Exactly. People have a false sense of security just because they are under a roof. But dust is tiny. It finds every crack in a window frame. It comes in on your clothes and in your hair. If you are in a high pollution event, you have to think about your entire day, not just the time you spend on the sidewalk.
You know, we should probably talk about the different types of sensors too. Daniel mentioned the IQ Air app, which is a popular one. There is also Purple Air and various government sensors. Why do they sometimes give different readings? It can be confusing when one says 100 and the other says 140.
This is where it gets nerdy, so bear with me. Government sensors are usually the gold standard. They use a method called gravimetric analysis, where they literally weigh the particles collected on a filter over a period of time. It is incredibly accurate, but it is slow. The data you see on an app from a government station is often delayed by an hour or more because they have to process the reading.
And what about the consumer-grade sensors like Purple Air that we see on the maps?
Those use laser counters. They shine a laser through a small chamber of air and count how the light scatters when it hits a particle. It is instantaneous, which is great for seeing real-time spikes, but they can be affected by humidity. If it is very humid, the sensor might mistake a tiny water droplet for a dust particle and give you a falsely high reading.
So, in a dry dust storm like we have today, where the humidity is very low, the laser sensors are probably quite accurate?
Yes, they are usually very reliable for mineral dust. The problem is when people see a huge discrepancy between two apps and get confused. My rule of thumb is to look at the trend. If all the sensors in the city are trending up, it does not really matter if one says 110 and the other says 130. The message is the same, the air is getting worse, so take precautions now.
I think there is also a second-order effect here that we should mention. When the air is this bad, people tend to stay indoors. They close their windows, and they might turn on the air conditioning. But in many older buildings, that just means you are recirculating indoor pollutants like dust mites, pet dander, or even fumes from cooking.
That is such a good point, Corn. If you seal yourself in a room to escape the dust, but then you fry up some onions on a gas stove without a vent, you might actually be creating a worse AQI inside your kitchen than what is happening outside. Cooking on a gas stove can easily push PM 2.5 levels into the hundreds in a small apartment within minutes.
So, the advice is, escape the outdoors, but do not create a mini pollution event in your own living room.
Right. Use your HEPA filter. Use your range hood when cooking, and maybe skip the scented candles or incense on a day like today. Your lungs are already under stress from the ambient air. Don't give them extra work to do at home. Also, when the storm passes, do not just open the windows and start vacuuming. The dust will have settled on every surface.
Oh, that is a good tip. What should we do instead?
Use a damp cloth to wipe down surfaces. If you use a vacuum without a HEPA filter, you are just picking up the dust and spraying it back into the air in a finer, more breathable form. Wet dusting is the way to go after a Hamson.
I am curious about the long-term aspect of this. We are seeing these dust storms happen more frequently, or at least they feel more frequent as the climate shifts. For someone with asthma, is there a cumulative effect over years of living in a place with these occasional spikes?
Unfortunately, the research suggests yes. Repeated exposure to high particulate levels can lead to what doctors call airway remodeling. That is a fancy way of saying your lungs develop microscar tissue or become permanently more reactive and sensitive. It is not just about surviving the day, it is about protecting your future lung function. This is why I am so adamant about the masks and the filters. It is not being oversensitive, it is being proactive about your long-term health.
It is like wearing earplugs at a loud concert. You might not go deaf from one show, but if you do it every week for 10 years, you are going to have a serious problem.
Exactly. It is all about the total dose over your lifetime. If you can reduce your total lifetime exposure to PM 2.5 by even 20% by using filters and masks on bad days, you are significantly lowering your risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, and other issues later in life.
So, for everyone listening, especially our fellow Jerusalemites staring at the orange sky today, let us recap the practical guidance. Herman, give us the final breakdown.
Okay, here is the cheat sheet. 0 to 50, go for a run and enjoy the fresh air. 51 to 100, enjoy the walk, but maybe do not do a marathon if you have asthma. 101 to 150, this is the orange zone. If you have asthma, reduce your outdoor time. Wear an N95 or KN95 mask for any walk longer than a few minutes. Move your exercise indoors to a filtered environment.
And the red zone.
151 to 200, avoid being outside. If you must go, the mask is mandatory for your health. Close your windows and run your air purifiers on high. If you start feeling symptoms, do not wait. Use your maintenance or rescue inhaler as prescribed by your doctor.
And above 200?
Stay inside. Seal the cracks. It is a health emergency for everyone, but especially for you.
That is really clear. And I think it takes the guesswork out of it. It turns a scary orange sky into a set of actionable steps. I also want to echo what Daniel said about the HEPA filters. If you live in a city with any kind of air quality issues, a good air purifier is one of the best investments you can make for your home. It is not just for the bad days, it is for the baseline health every single night while you sleep.
Absolutely. We spend about a third of our lives sleeping. If you can ensure that for those 8 hours your lungs are breathing truly clean air, you are giving your body a massive advantage in recovering from whatever it encountered during the day. Look for a filter with an H13 or H14 rating, which means it catches 99.9% of particles.
Well, I feel like I have learned a lot today. I am definitely going to be a bit more diligent about checking the AQI before I head out for my evening walk. And Herman, thank you for breaking down the science of the masks. I think it helps to know that it is not just a piece of cloth. It is a sophisticated filter that actually works against these tiny particles.
My pleasure. It is one of those things where a little bit of technical knowledge can really empower you to make better choices for your health. And hey, if you are listening and you found this helpful, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It helps other people find the show and join our weird little community of curious minds.
It really does. We love seeing those reviews come in. Also, if you want to get in touch or see our archives, head over to myweirdprompts.com. We have all 543 episodes there, including this one.
543. We have been doing this a long time, Corn.
We have. And thanks to Daniel for the prompt today. It was very timely given the state of the sky right now. I think I'm going to go make sure our HEPA filter is actually turned on and the filters are clean.
Good call. I will go check the one in the living room.
Alright everyone, thanks for listening to my weird prompts. Stay safe, breathe easy, and we will talk to you in the next one.
Goodbye everyone. Stay healthy out there.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.